with a little imagination, all things are possible. Under the guiding vision of Jane Addams, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom's first international president and first American woman awarded the Nobel Prize. Does anybody know when that was? What year?
1931.
Correct. Sorry, no prize, but correct. The women and men of WILPF focus our intelligence and determination to bring the issues of peace and justice to the forefront of our national consciousness. To educate, to agitate, to illuminate. Founded in 1948, the Jane Addams Peace Association serves as the nonprofit side of WILPF and practices peace with children through the Children's Book Award, among other programs, promoting Addams' demand for a democracy that cares about our children. Addams also demanded we roll up our sleeves and get to work. This afternoon, we have the rare opportunity to once again confirm our children's education is the primary force toward a peace-filled future. Imagine that. A world where peace is the goal rather than winning another war. But imagination can never be kept in a little box, to be used for only special occasions. Rather, it is the foundation of life. As Jane Addams once wrote, we have learned as common knowledge that much of the insensibility and hardness of the world is due to the lack of imagination, which prevents the realization of experiences of other people. Added to that thought, a young Irish writer, Colum McCann, wrote, "Through books, we learn how to live, even if we weren't there." Fiction gives us an access to a very real history. Stories are the best democracy that we have. We are allowed to become the other we never knew.
So, look at the writing there.
Books of Wonder.
May I ask why you chose this book?
I love this book. The writing is incredible. She's an amazing writer. I love everything about it.
Oh, so you've read other books by her?
No, it's my first. This is my first children's book.
Thanks to the Jane Addams Peace Association and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom for sponsoring these awards that in their 58th year now honor the activism of Jane Addams and her quest for social justice.
Ruth and the Green Book, a 2011 Jane Addams Honor Book for younger children, was written by Calvin Ramsey with Gwen Strauss and illustrated by Floyd Cooper. It was published by Carol Rhoda Books, a division of Lerner Publishing Group, Inc. Through the journey of young Ruth and her family, we learn of the struggles of many African Americans as they traveled in the Jim Crow South. And we also learn of the creativity and resourcefulness of New York postal worker Victor H. Green, who published the Negro Motorist Green Book for 28 years, beginning in 1936. It was the 20th century equivalent of the Underground Railroad. I'm pleased to present an honor to Mr. Floyd Cooper.
Thank you for standing steadfast in your work for peace, social justice, and community May the selections of this committee continue to hold and help gird our youth with armor of truth and empathy, giving them a place to stand steadfast for those that follow them and those that follow them until this world is as it should be. Thank you very much.
It's really a wonderful event, and I'm so grateful to the Jane Addams Peace Association for making this possible. So thank you, all of you, and thank you to my friends and family who made it. This is very exciting for me. And thank you to the team, Floyd and Calvin. I also want to thank another person who's not here, but who really brought us all together, and this is Janice Shea. She's the one who brought Calvin and I together and made this, and had the idea to try to make a children's book about this great story. I have a teeny bit of words. I feel that the world is a difficult place. There's no lack of suffering, and everywhere we look, you can find evidence of injustice and inequality. It's a heartbreaking, easy story to tell, but it's much harder to tell stories of hope. But those stories are there as well. Times when ingenuity, creativity, and the stubborn human spirit was able to find a way to subvert the powerful forces against it. I think of Hull House, and Jane Addams is a great example. She creatively responded to the terrible conditions of immigrant families in the tenements, and with her vision, she created a compassionate and interdependent place. Victor Green created his Green Book in response to difficulties of travel for the African American during Jim Crow. It allowed community to thrive where the powerful wanted to keep the individual silenced. The Green Book was a way to step out when stepping out of line could get you killed. Last night, I took the opportunity to visit Occupy Wall Street. And here again, people are trying to create a place where everyone has a voice, where the status quo does not drown out the individual. And they've found a creative response to the feelings of powerlessness. We have to remind each other of these stories, that people like Victor Green, like Jane Addams, with brave and creative spirits, find ways around difficulty.
Calvin Alexander Ramsey is a noted playwright and author. And I read where he said that his creative process was to find stories about unsung heroes and bring them to life. And I think it's pretty obvious that Victor H. Green was one of those unsung heroes. He fits that definition beautifully, and so does Mr. Ramsey for telling his story. Calvin Ramsey.
10 years ago, I had never heard of the Green Book. A dear friend of mine, Big Tony and his wife, Pat, the parents of 9 children, and the oldest child was killed in a car accident. And his name was, we called him Little Tony. And they were originally from New York City, living in Atlanta, Georgia. So I went to the funeral. I'm like Uncle Calvin, and went there, and all 8 kids with his wife died, was with the parents. And the grandfather came down from New York, retired mailman. So after the service, we were all in the backyard, and the grandfather looked at me. His first time in the Deep South, he said, I was looking for a Green Book. And I said, well, what's a Green Book? And he started explaining to me what the Green Book was. I just want to say thank you for liking the book, and the book could not have been done without Gwen and Floyd. They really are, I think, the magic behind this whole thing. And I'm just a tag along, I feel like, in a lot of ways. But anyway, thanks a lot, and thanks for accepting the book and accepting me as in this new world of make-believe and real-life stuff, too. Thank you.
How 4 Friends Stood Up by Sitting Down, by Andrea Davis Pinkney, illustrated by Brian Pinkney, and published by Little Brown Books for Young Readers, is a lyrical, powerful portrayal of the sit-ins and nonviolent protests that forcibly integrated many areas of the country in the 1960s. A donut and coffee with cream on the side. This is all 4 young black men are hoping for when they sit down at a Woolworth's counter and patiently wait for service, a wait that will last for years. But, as the text makes clear, the young people's fight is not about food, it's about pride. It's about no longer being the hole in the donut, made to feel invisible by oppression and injustice. The spirit and determination of the sit-in participants are reflected in the dynamic watercolors and India ink illustrations that create a sensation of energy, momentum, and power. Even when sitting still, the protesters seemed to vibrate with a sense of purpose. Rhythmic and lively, the written verse fairly begs to be read aloud. Pulsing with vibrant imagery and a very apt food-related metaphor, the text is both appropriate to children who want to learn about the history of the civil rights movement and a work of beauty and art in and of itself. The slogan for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, one of the prominent organizations involved in the sit-in protests across the country, was, "We are all leaders." In highlighting the simple actions of a small group of young people that grew exponentially until thousands of people were involved, until those patiently waiting men could no longer be ignored, until the very laws of the country were changed. This is a message that encourages children that they too have power, that it is dedication and commitment, not wealth, nor the powers of authority, that will ultimately change the world. For creating a passionate, lyrical portrayal of an important event in the history of the American Civil Rights Movement, the committee awards Brian Pinkney and Andrea Davis Pinkney the Honor Award in the category for younger readers.
Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. I know people know it. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. We must meet hate with love. We must meet violence with nonviolence. That is very hard to do. But those are the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that inspired those 4 college students on February 1st, 1960, to go into that Greensboro, North Carolina lunch counter and sit down. And yes, they sat straight and proud and waited and wanted a donut and coffee with cream on the side. Those kids didn't budge. They didn't move until they were served. They refused. All they wanted was some food, a donut and coffee with cream on the side. Yes, that was the day that it happened, February 1st, 1960. Those friends were there with one goal in mind, and that goal was peace. And here we are today, celebrating the legacy of Jane Addams. And here we sit together as friends with one goal in our mind, and that goal is peace. Now, I go to a lot of schools, and I'm very happy to see some young people here this afternoon, and I always ask the students, if you left here this afternoon and you went with your buddies to an eating establishment and you sat down and you were served, and for any reason at all whatsoever, there were 4 people over there and they were not being served, what would you do? I say, what would you do if you went into the eating establishment and you were the one being discriminated against? You're sitting patiently, quietly, adhering to the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and someone pours hot coffee or ketchup on the white shirt that your mother has ironed that morning.
With a little imagination, all things are possible.